Welcome to InFocus, a closer look at human relations. I'm your host, Bill Bell. This program is sponsored by the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission. Our guests today are from Mayor Cranley's Task Force on Immigration. Is that a fair title? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Mr. Kandor. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, my name is Raj Chundur.
Chundur, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I work for the city of Cincinnati, and the mayor asked us to be the co-chair of the Task Force on Immigration, and we're happy to serve on that.
Okay, and this is Tom Fernandez.
Tom Fernandez. I'm with SFA Architects. I guess I was somewhat drafted as well as Raj, and really enjoyed the process to date.
Okay, so enjoyed the process today. So this is something that's still going on, correct?
We're looking at wrapping it up soon.
Okay. Okay. So I guess the first question I'll ask is, you were drafted to be part of the Task Force on Immigration. What is the Task Force on Immigration?
So let me take a shot at that.
Okay.
I think it was a privilege to be asked to serve on this task force because I think immigration is a key topic, especially given the history of the United States, right? And I think it's pretty timely. And with myself being an immigrant coming from India, I think it was an exciting effort done by the mayor to bring this to the forefront, right? And we can just put it in one sentence that the mayor said. He wants Cincinnati to be the best immigrant-friendly city in the United States.
Okay.
Right? And that's the goal.
Okay. Now, yeah, because I guess the conversation nationally is about illegal immigration, but this has nothing to do with that. Is that fair?
It's not. That's really not the topic here. It's about opening the doors, creating opportunities for immigrants to come to the United States, to come to Cincinnati.
Okay.
And majority of the immigrants coming to Cincinnati are actually coming from other parts of the United States.
All right. So, well, yeah, I think that what we do is we get wrapped up into the national conversation about it, but this is not stories that we tend to share. So I applaud the work that you gentlemen are doing. So tell me a couple of things that are going on. Obviously this was an important thing to the mayor, it's an important issue. The task force consists of how many people, how big is it?
It's approximately 80 individuals, representatives of business, labor, faith groups, service organizations are a big part of the group. They're all volunteers. Impressive group of individuals. Some of them are essentially our front line for immigration issues and creating a friendlier environment. Attorneys, for example, that specialize in immigration laws. Others, it just strikes home. I mean, for example, I'm an architect. For me, it's was kind of a reflection of where my family came from and how we arrived here in Cincinnati, and how do we make it a better process.
You say a process. Can you give an example?
Well, how do we collectively take all the service agencies, all the organizations that are out there marketing Cincinnati to the global community, and how do we collectively make sure that we're working and rowing along the same direction? And so it's coordination of services has a lot to do with it.
Do you think that one of the questions is about making it friendly, immigrant friendly? I didn't get the impression that Cincinnati was not already immigrant friendly. Was there in selection or the forming of this task force, was there a particular thing that occurred that we thought that this was important, or was it just to be ahead of the game? Can you share?
I think the general trend has been that immigrants play a key role in so many different areas, right? Including strengthening the economy, revitalization of housing in different parts of the cities, and overall, from a business perspective, a lot of entrepreneurship comes from these immigrant communities, right? So it is vital for long-term prosperity and growth that Cincinnati play a key role in attracting immigrants, right? And that's part of the big picture. How do we continue to prosper and grow and have diversity of ideas, constantly coming in? And I think that's a major thrust for engaging in these kind of activities, right?
Okay.
And
Mark Twain always said that Cincinnati is always 20 years behind. Well, we're about 10 years behind in this issue. There are cities around us like Columbus. They started a similar process back in 2004. All the other major cities in Ohio have already gone through this. We probably should have started a few years back, so it's really catch up. It's part of it's keeping up with the Joneses.
Okay.
We're competing for the best talent that's out there worldwide, trying to keep them here locally when they do arrive to go to school here at the various universities. So that's a big part of why it's critical to address it.
Now, did you gentlemen know each other prior to being on the task force?
No, we did not.
And how is this partnership? How does it? Do you have a different view of Cincinnati since you now work together? Each person, I guess, in the task force brings a different experience and different ideals. So how do you take these various experiences and ideals and educational levels and things like that and make it work? How's that happen?
To start off, Tom mentioned that this task force was made up of volunteers, right?
Okay.
And when we had this kickoff session, it was absolutely fascinating to see the energy and the passion that many of these folks had on immigration and how do we make Cincinnati welcoming and so on and so forth. And that in itself was an eye-opening experience, just to see that level of interest and the level of commitment that various groups had,
Okay.
right? And again, from my perspective, when I came here in '97 to what I see now, it's been a dramatic change in the, in the diversity and the ethnicity and the kind of broadening that you see happen in this region.
Can you give an example?
To take a very basic stuff, since I come from India, I look for simple things like a grocery store. Maybe there were few when I came in '97. Now you see a variety of ethnic restaurants, groceries. Kroger is now stocking an ethnic aisle, which I never seen it before, right? And that's a very simple example of how, having this kind of diversity opens up. It's a global economy today, and we
Okay.
need to know what's happening around the world. And I think that's a key part of this experience.
Well, it's definitely an attraction, and to see, I guess, those changes, as subtle as they are, you don't realize that there is a change. What does the task force, and you've covered, ideals and expanding and things of that nature, but is there, what's the agenda of the task force?
Well, the task force was broken up into 5 subcommittees.
Okay.
One of the subcommittees worked on education and talent retention. It's not only the K-12 and understanding the ESL issues, but it's also looking again at the universities and what they do to our economy and how we can retain the very best that's trained here.
Okay.
Another group looked at rights and safety. Those are the most obvious issues, identification, the rights of the immigrant. There's an education piece associated with that as well. Economic development,
Okay.
just the impact that the immigrant society could have here. For example, immigrants are about 70% more likely to own a business, start a business and own it, than those who are born here in the States.
Can I stay with that for a minute?
Sure.
You said 70% more likely to start a business and own it. Can you elaborate? Did you're in this experience or in this task force, was there a reason why that happens?
Well, part of it goes back to their drive of why they're here.
Okay.
Part of it goes to the education. 25% of immigrants coming to this area have a professional or college degree. I mean, they generally it's a very productive group of folks that are. It's a big challenge to go to a new place, a new country, and start fresh.
Yeah.
It takes a very brave soul to do that. So, some of the other groups, international attractiveness, I think that separates Cincinnati from a lot of the other cities that have looked at it, where we kind of look at it, and maybe it's because of the companies that we have here. We looked at it from a global perspective. What can we do outside this country to start getting the word out that Cincinnati is a great place to come to?
International attractiveness. So you said some of our businesses, and you know we have Federated here, we have P&G here. So was it in this task force? I take it there were partners that represented those organizations.
That wasn't a focus.
Okay.
In terms of, we didn't intentionally say, well, we needed someone from Procter & Gamble or any of these organizations. But for the most part, I think a lot of the members did have experience or had worked. Maybe that was their first entry into the market.
Okay.
And then they've gone and now started their own private business or moved on. So there are definitely a lot of ties to those corporations.
Okay. I mean, we not to put any corporation out, but I just think that's a interesting committee.
Right.
And we had participation from the different chambers of commerce and so on in the task force.
So you said there were 5. Did I?
One other one is resources and development, and that has to do more with the traditional resources that are provided to immigrants. There's a lot of social service agencies out there, and what we found interesting is that a lot of them were doing some great work,
Okay.
but there wasn't necessarily conversation occurring. There isn't a one-stop shop that a new immigrant coming to Cincinnati was able to find. So if you needed help with with housing, you really had to hunt around, and
Okay.
you might hit a service provider, but even they didn't have the information. So that's one of the things we've learned is that there's a lot of great organizations, a lot of great resources, and what this task team I think is really pushing for is to have a coordinated effort.
Okay.
And this was something that the group themselves felt was a need,
Okay.
right? That they wanted to have a much more coordinated sense of providing the service, and there's no duplication among the groups themselves.
So to let people know what's going on,
Exactly.
but to also be efficient
Yeah.
in that. So if a person locates here or wants to locate here, of course there's a process outside of what I know. I'm really unfamiliar with how this works. I've been not an immigrant. At least I'm not aware that I am. And typically I think that a person has to get a visa to come into the country, and has to have a place. But in terms of resources, when you talk about that, is there something that we're missing? Is it just like hooking up with social resources or religious? I mean, what exactly does that mean? And I asked that question, but I have to take a break. So you're watching InFocus. It's a closer look at human relations. We're with the Mayor's Task Force on Immigration, and we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to InFocus, a closer look at human relations. I'm your host, Bill Bell. And prior to the break, we were speaking with members of the Mayor's Task Force on Immigration. And I want to ask you guys about some of the work of the subcommittees, or what they've done. So if you could just, I think during the break we talked about education being something that was important. And if we could just elaborate on why education is important and how do we do that? How do we get that information out?
So let me quickly go through some of the main tasks
Okay.
that the subcommittee focused on. One was, first off, information gathering. What is it that we have in the region, and how can we best leverage that, right? and each committee focused on those aspects. Then they kind of analyzed those information, looked at best practices across both sister cities within Ohio and across the nation, and then based on those in-depth discussions among the groups, and they were pretty much given a wide latitude to come up with their ideas and their recommendations, and also kind of prioritize them. What is something that can be done in a very short period of time? What are some points that they can hit in the midterm and in the long term? And that was pretty much the kind of the focus the task force were given.
Okay.
And many of these people came up with very creative ideas with some common threads running through them, right? And one of the main things was coordination that we talked about. And before we touch upon that coordination aspect, I think, Tom, you want to elaborate on the education aspect that you were trying to highlight in the previous segment?
Well, we are blessed with some great institutions.
Okay.
But one of the things we're seeing is a lot of the students aren't given opportunities here, are having to leave. They we're essentially creating this talent, but then not taking advantage of it. So what one of the things we're trying to do is to focus in on how do we keep that? How do we help employers out there learn the process? It's not that monumental to get the right visas. There is a cost. How do we make it easier for them? So,
and that's, if we can stay with that, you said that we have talented people, we have good schools here, and you said they leave or we can't retain them. And is it because of visas, or is it?
Yes, they essentially have to get an H-1B visa, and it's a competitive process. Companies, they have to show that they have employment.
So they have to be hired.
They have to be hired, but before they could start work, they have to secure the visa.
Really?
So.
And is that a lengthy process? You said it's competitive, but competitive doesn't mean it takes a long time. So what's the and I'll give an example. We have a good kid. A company wants to hire this kid. I shouldn't say kid, but we have a great potential employee. A company wants to hire this person. What's the holdup in that? You say a visa. What's the?
They have to have permission and get a work visa.
Permission
from the government.
Okay.
This is a federal issue,
Okay.
federal process that they have to go through, and also that the company has to assist with. So.
Really?
Yes.
So
we had, for example, we
Okay.
had an employee that came from Brazil,
Okay.
and before she could start work, it was about a 4-month process just to get her approved and where she could start.
And thank you for this. So you have an employee, this 4 months, and the 4 month was just the governmental bureaucracy?
Well, and yes, making sure that the government has to verify that there is an opportunity, a work opportunity for that immigrant.
Okay, and that's the federal government, not...
That's the federal government, right. And we really try, we recognize all the federal issues that are out there, but we're not changing the world.
Okay.
We're not changing the government. Might be easier to change the world than the government. No, I think there's some really strong recommendations that the committees, Raj talked about common interests that each of the committees came up with.
Okay.
Maybe we could talk a little bit. One of the most important ones, exciting ones, is the creation of a new center for new Cincinnatians.
Okay.
Earlier I used the phrase one stop, essentially creating a one-stop shop for someone coming to the city.
And that was a recommendation by
the committee,
Okay.
and it's something that the whole group is working to try to get formed and and moved ahead. I mean, that's probably the one element or suggestion that all 5 subcommittees came up with.
Okay. Now, do you think, in that example and this, how does the committee's recommendation and the challenges from the federal government, how do they mirror? For example, would a person come to this one shop and be given, I guess, legal support to expedite it? Like, is a 4-month process a normal process?
I've heard it could take less, and I've heard it could take more time.
Okay.
I mean, it's just really a timing issue when you start the process. But yet the point that we create this center is that someone who is seeking a certain type of resource, certain type of help, information, they'll be able to get it there, or at least be directed to the right social service agency or the proper attorney who can help them.
Okay. And I know you didn't bring this up, so it's a bold question. But in this conversation, did it ever come up about deportation, just to use the example of the 4 months and maybe a visa being refused? Is that something that we're concerned about? Like, if you have you're a business owner, you have a great employee, she's in the process of trying to obtain her visa, her work privileges, and what happens if it's denied? Where do you go from there?
Well, and that's really where it gets beyond our scope.
Okay.
As a group, we're not able to change laws.
Yeah.
So we're working within the framework that's existing, and trying to essentially compete for the very best that's out there and available.
I would just imagine that if there's a one-stop shop, which I think is a good idea, that you'll be faced with that type of question, and
Right.
I would think that someone would have probably just brought that up, and only because it's one of the things that's currently going on in our climate. That's what people are talking about, as unfair as that may be, is still a subject. So,
Right, and there's service providers in our community. There's immigration attorneys that are able to help address those issues.
Okay. So, in terms of moving forward, how do you create this one stop? What's you said it, you think it should be done, and I agree with that, but what's the next step?
Yeah. So now that the various committees, have given their preliminary recommendations, and some of the common threads have been identified, smaller groups are now working specifically on, the key next step, which is how do we think through the process of setting up this new welcoming center for the new Cincinnatians, right?
Okay.
And that's an ongoing process at this time. So that's one of the key steps that is ongoing at this point in time. A lot of research is being done. We have to look in terms of the structure of the organization, and how do we configure those, and what is the short-term plan? How do we ensure its long-term viability? All those discussions are currently ongoing.
Yeah. And Bill, one of the things that it's important to realize is this is just the beginning.
Okay.
The work that we've started it's going to hopefully continue a long conversation with the community to define the needs. The center, I think, will provide that framework for that continued work that others will have to take on, and so that's exciting to get it started.
You speak as if there's going to be a changing of guard. Is that fair? Like, the task force, does it have a time frame that it's going to exist, or what's going on? In other words, if somebody wants to get involved,
Right.
how do they get involved? It started out with being voluntary.
Right.
Is there still opportunities for people to become part of this conversation?
Well, I think we're wrapping up the recommendations over the next month.
Okay.
We're hoping to go public with those. With that said, I think there would be many opportunities to join in on that continued conversation.
Okay.
And there's a lot of service providers who are looking for volunteers,
Okay.
looking for individuals who are wanting to make a difference or have been affected, impacted some way in a positive manner that they want to give back. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities.
I want to go back to the task force and just down that real with it being voluntary. Was it comprised primarily of immigrants, or was it just a broad representative of people that were both, immigrant and local?
I think it was a combination of broad segment of the community,
Okay.
pretty much. And the interesting thing was it was not the city of Cincinnati. We had
was it?
people from across the region participating in this effort.
Okay.
That was a really interesting outcome, just because jurisdictional boundaries doesn't stop, the need and the
need for
requirement.
conversation.
Exactly, right? So one of the exciting things was organically this became kind of a very in-depth, widespread
Okay.
group.
Okay. Well, we're close to out of time, and I appreciate you gentlemen joining us today. For people to get more information, is there a website or phone number that you can share?
I think you can go to the mayor's website, and there's a link that we are all immigrants, and I think that's a good starting point.
Okay. So, City of Cincinnati.
City of Cincinnati.
Mayor's website. We are all immigrants, and if a person wants additional information, they can visit that.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I greatly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this information with the people that view this program. You have been watching InFocus, a closer look at human relations, and we'll see you next time.